Today, we're joined by Brad, a highly successful general contractor with years of experience in the construction industry. From his early days working as an electrician to building some of the most luxurious homes in Arizona, Brad has seen it all. In this episode, we delve into Brad's journey, exploring the challenges and rewards of building a successful construction business. We'll discuss the importance of navigating regulations, finding the right balance between risk and reward, and the crucial role of strong relationships in the industry. Get ready for an insightful conversation with Brad as we uncover the secrets to success in the world of construction. Let's go.
Brad, love it. We're going to talk about real estate. I got some projects in real estate right now, so this is going to be like a tutorial for me. It's going to be, because I'm not a GC, I'm not a general contractor, although my brother is a commercial general contractor, retired now, 38 years, So let's get into how you segued into your business. I want to get the origin story, try to figure out the algorithm of success, right? Were you always into did you know what you wanted to do when you're younger? How'd you segue into, being a builder?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually grew up in the industry. I was in the trades, electrician, grew up in San Diego. Was very fortunate to work on some pretty unique projects in Rancho Santa Fe and Coronado and La Jolla. And, I really enjoyed, and my uncle, who I worked for at the time with my cousins, we did commercial and residential. So I really enjoyed construction. I mean, it's really tough work, especially having bags on through high school and after high school. And, I was like, I think I'm going to go to school for business. So my plan was to always go to college and do business. So I was, I had declared, a business, major. I was planning to eventually go get an MBA in finance, down the road. And I was probably a year into undergraduate, and a couple buddies of mine were doing construction management. And I'm like, that sounds interesting. They're like, yeah, we only came here for construction management. This is the plan. And I'm like, I know construction, I've been involved. I have a good understanding. And they were speaking about some of the opportunities in the industry because, as we know, trades have been leaving the workforce for a long time, and we need builders. We need, people in that industry. And so I just felt it was a good opportunity. And again, in fairness, this is early 2000s. I graduated in 2005. So 2003, 4, 5, when I was in college and graduating, it was like the ideal time. This is pre-recession. So when I was graduating, everyone was hungry and there was a ton of opportunities. So that's really the early beginnings that kind of launched to where I am today.
So what were you, a subcontractor? What were you doing? Electric?
Yeah, so I was an electrician, just a subcontractor working for, commercial general contractors and residential, and just didn't really, I honestly, I just felt this was means to an end, right? Like, I made good money in the trades. You can do that. I made more than all my friends who were working, at, fast food restaurants or, whatever they were doing in high school. I was definitely making more doing construction. And yet here I am today. And now we've been fortunate to build some of the most incredible luxury homes in all of Scottsdale and Phoenix. So, there is a journey that always gets you there, but that was definitely early beginnings.
Well, let's talk about California. I'm from California. Now I live in Georgetown, Texas, which is a big difference as far as construction is concerned.
Yeah.
I told you my brother, he's a general contractor and now retired in California. The regulations are quite severe over there. So is that where, did you start doing start building over there, or did you start in Arizona?
It's a great question. So when I was, to your point of the regulations, it's really hard to build in California for a lot of reasons. And, the reality is, like, now I own a small business. Very tough to own a small business in California, right? It's just, I think it's tough owning a small business in general, right? The ups and downs. The reality is so when I was graduating from college, I did still have a desire to go back to California. That's where I'm from. My family's from there, Southern California. I love Southern California. But being married, having my first daughter at the time, realistically, California was just not a place where I could afford, as a young college graduate, to live and really have a decent living there. And so I looked at, again, I didn't want to be in a cold climate. That's just, I'm not built for that. So I was looking at Texas and Florida and Vegas and Arizona. And Arizona just made the most sense. It was closest to Southern California. The market was great. It was growing. People were moving to Phoenix. And, looking back now is the best decision ever, right? Because to your point, again, just the building environment, pro business. There's a lot of things that have been very valuable now starting a business here. So it was kind of by accident, because it's not like I knew I'd be an entrepreneur later in life, but it definitely worked out in my favor for sure.
How difficult was it going from being just, it's kind of nice shoehorn being an electrician, but how, did you GC your own projects, and how difficult was it transitioning to that small microcosm to the big package?
Yeah, that's a good question, because, I would say the benefit of doing electrical, unfortunately through college, I did installation, which was brutal. Like, installing, rock wool and bad insulation and fiberglass insulation. Like it's a tough job. And then I did a lot of low voltage, I'd go back to San Diego over the summers and work on the military bases, do fiber optics and different low voltage and fire alarm and stuff. And so just the appreciation when I became a general contractor out of college, I worked for a large firm, 6 years out of college before starting my company. And so working for someone else, one, you get a good training and understanding of the business and operation. And, it's one thing being a trade partner, like running electrical. It's another thing being in charge of an entire project and all the scopes of work. And even if you had a college education, you touch everything at a high level. You don't, so being in the field, it's a little bit different. You're baptism by fire learning, and you definitely have to, it's experience. It takes time to understand that. So it's a totally different world. But fortunately, having, a good team and good people around me, you get that training. And even though I was pretty green at the time, and ended up being, and you rely on the trades, a lot of the trades and really even more than relying on them and asking questions. I think where I got along with my trades a lot, just as the superintendent, was I knew what they were dealing with because I had my bags on not too long ago, right? I knew how hard it is some days when you don't feel like it and you got to wake up and do that first personal, like that physical labor. So, have an appreciation where it's not just, hey, hit the schedule and be done. And you can, empathize with your trades when it's hot outside, or maybe they broke up with their girlfriend, or they're tired or not feeling good, right? There's a lot of things that go into it.
Right. So did you start building and then for other people, or did you start building for yourself and then leasing out, or what did that look like?
Oh, good question. Yeah. So we worked for a lot of private developers, that were, who were doing some investment. One in particular, there was a real estate company out of Newport Beach, out of California, that was doing this $300 million hotel resort in Paradise Valley.
Nice.
So they hired our firm. Yeah. And so for 3 years, I now worked at this $300 million property, where the property had 34 residences that lived full time at the hotel. Then they had, 288 guest rooms. They have a wedding chapel, restaurant, hair salon, one of the top spas in all of Arizona, so it's like all these amenities. And so you had definitely the high-end luxury construction for the residences. And then you also had the commercial element, because you're dealing with 300 guest rooms and, a restaurant and everything that goes into running a hotel with all the different, swimming pools and amenities. So for me, working on that development gave me a lot of insight to how things transact, the transactions between real estate, between banking and financing, the hotel. That's what a lot of people don't realize is, and I didn't know this till the time, is even a lot of hotels, they don't own the property. They lease just like a tenant, a renter would. So this one in particular was, at the time, IHG, which is Intercontinental Hotel Group. And so you had the developer that owns the property. They signed a 20-year lease with IHG, who would occupy it and run it. And they had, which I won't share here, but they had a substantial check due every day, of 20 years for rent. And so just like a landlord tenant, you see that in the commercial world too, where some hotels own the property and some they lease out.
Yeah, I guess, so this was like it took 3 years to do, you build it from scratch?
Yeah. So there was an old, it's on Lincoln and Tatum in Arizona. And there was an old resort called La Posada. And it was, dated, very old, needed to be torn down. So this developer came in, purchased the resort, and demoed almost. So there's a few buildings around the perimeter. Like there were like probably 4 or 5 existing buildings, single story, with hotel rooms. And they renovated those just to kind of give the feel of the old resort. So those were renovated. But then all of the 2-story guest rooms were new build ground up. The residences were ground up, the swimming pools, the arrival zone, the conference center. There's a lot of companies that have their conferences there because they have an incredible lobby, incredible conference rooms. I mean, it's definitely built for big events. And so, 95% of that resort's brand new and 5% was remodeled.
Do you also have your own properties that you build and you lease out?
Good question. So since then, that was when I was working for someone else and I was young, in my 20s at the time, and you're just trying to get by almost day to day as opposed to investing. But since then, when I started my company, this is where, I'm running, AFT Construction, where we are fortunate to work on homes that range up to 35,000 square feet, right? The clients are living in these big properties. Yeah. And in addition to that we have our own, residences that we've purchased and we lease out. We have a lot of commercial development we've done. So I have land that we've leased out to McDonald's. We have land that we've sold to In-N-Out Burger, right? So there's, Outback Steakhouse, there's, Chase Bank, there's like land development we've done, and with Salad and Go and Dutch Bros and some of these other companies. And so, being able to dabble in commercial real estate, how that ties into residential, it's definitely, when you're what's called a paper contractor, such as myself, like a true general contractor that's managing for fee to build a project, you need brick and mortar behind you because the market goes up and down. We've seen this, the housing recession, but construction in general has these waves. Real estate does as well. So if you have brick and mortar and some value to the company, it helps you create streams of revenue that can carry you through those low times, right? As the market, is pivoting.
So the reason why I asked, I'm going to use me as a guinea pig. I'm a small, and real estate investor. So let's say, like right now, we'll start. I have a building in Palmdale, California.
Mm-hmm.
I'm now in Texas, so I want to get out of there. I'm doing 1031 exchange. I said,
Yep.
I got a 10-acre property. I have my company, Tarps Plus and Bullator, which is an outdoor products company. Mm-hmm. But I also, want to be able to build on. I said, why not take that investment and then do 1031? And then I'm going to build this out because you can build we want to build 6 for this particular property on 5 acres, 6 warehouse offices, like a, kind of like a, what do they call it? College or university?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Like community driveway and all that. And we're in the ETJ, so there's not a lot of restriction. I don't want a GC myself, save a lot of money. How would you coach me? With all your expertise, what would you say is like things you gotta, some of the basics, but step 1, contacting the county, doing this. Where's a lot of the problems go wrong? Is it in the foundation, the soil removing area? Where can a lot of things go wrong? And what would you suggest that I be cognitive of?
That's a really good question. And so, first and foremost, as you've done, you kind of want to have a good idea of what that, you want to have that feasibility study done, right? As an investor or your own, this is 101 for you, that you want to make sure that the numbers work, right? And the reality is, and where this becomes important, and the only reason I bring it up because inflation, cost. Construction's a lot different. It's a lot more expensive today than it was 6 years ago, a lot more than 3 years ago. And so, some investors are like, hey, I would rather buy a dilapidated or like a building that's been vacant for a long time because the bones are there. Mm-hmm. For me to go build a ground up, say, shopping center, it may cost me, I don't know, $180 a square foot. Whereas I can buy this one on the market with no tenants, with a poor cap rate at $60 a foot. Mm-hmm. So the building's there. Now I just got to go get tenants. I got to get an anchor. I got to get, these deals done. And then I could go sell at a good cap rate, so understanding the value there. But if you're building ground up, maybe you have the shells and you're like, okay, we got this, this university, this college, of buildings, and we're going to put some tenants in office, a office space, whatever. It's really doing some due diligence to understand, okay, what are we doing? Triple net, what's the rent roll going to be for those coming in? Are we sharing on property tax and utilities? And so that's always number one. Do the numbers work? And then when they work, yes, you need to have a good team in there. And, in commercial, predominantly it's cost plus. I operate at cost plus in the high-end luxury. And so when it's cost plus, the advantage for you is you get everything at cost and you have the markup. So it's very spelled out. You're taking the risk as the investor or owner because everything's great on paper, but if the market changes, it could go up, which hurts you. It could go down, which helps you. So you take the risk, but in your scenario, it's not too much risk because you're not building a custom home over 2 years. You're building the office space in 3 months. So there's not a whole lot of risk there. But the only reason I bring up the cost plus avenue is because the old guard would say, let me get 3 bids and I'm gonna get the cheapest guy. And it doesn't mean you can't do that. But if you can involve your contractor early to say, okay, here's our goal. We're trying to build for X dollars a square foot. This is how the pencil's going to work. Now you're being very creative with the builder and the architect and the engineering to design something that's not over designed, that still fits the look. You're within budget. You have a good grasp of it. And then, you're meeting with the city for the zoning and making sure you have permits and everything in line. And, you can just strategize by having the interior design, architecture, builder all together. So put your team together. A lot of times the builder and architect will help you get the approvals, and they have relationships at the town, and, they know the building codes. And so you're just it's just like anything. You fail the plan, you plan to fail. Like, get everyone involved on the same page with the same goal so that when you break ground, your pricing, you've worked through engineering together, the city's approved it, and now you can hit guns a-blazing.
Yeah. It's funny. You might chuckle when I tell you this. So my brother, he's, just retired a couple of years ago, but he was GC for about 38 years, whatever. And I am in Georgetown, Texas, which I'm not sure if you know where that is, but it's just outside of Austin, and I'm outside the city limits. Mm-hmm. So, we're not even in there's like a little adjacent town. We're like outside of there. So it's just county. So I told him, I said, look, I own the property. We want to put up metal buildings. He's like, well, you got to get civil plans. I said, okay. So then I contacted some civil guys, and I don't know if you know this area, Georgetown 3 years in a row is the #1 fastest growing city, over 50,000 people in the United States.
Amazing. I know it very well. It's beautiful. Yeah. It's awesome.
Okay. So I said, okay. I talked to a civil engineer and I can't believe I'm say this publicly. It's okay. They wanted like 80 grand. And I was like, because they're darlings. I said, and I'm a business person, so I'm used to doing things, bootstrap. So I said, I'm going to go on Fiverr and see what I can do here. Right. And I know I'm going to get my hair messed up. I know that there's going to be somebody overseas, and they're going to go on. They're going to look at all this. But I said, what's the cost, and how much is it going to cost me to go back and forth with this guy, as opposed to So they said, okay. So then, sure enough, I found a good guy. And he made some mistake, like he had drainage where drains where we don't need drains. It was by Georgetown's code, but he doesn't know we're in the TJ, right? So all these codes are maybe Austin or something. So then I go back and forth with the guys that are giving us bids, and then we got some good local guys, and they're like, no, you want to make this adjustment. So I go back to the guy. Basically, it cost me $4,600 for my civil plans, right?
Yep.
So that's step
Huge delta.
What's that?
Huge delta. That's a big difference.
Okay. Yeah. So then, this process though, because it's just me, I figured I want to save. I want to make sure that how much can I save out of the 1031 exchange money? I don't want to do a loan. I want to try to, do this all, So this process, this is where I'm kind of going. Even those steel buildings, a lot of these guys, other than Butler, which I'm sure you know who they are, right? Butler buildings or metal building companies. A lot of these guys are getting they might not wait so long. They're getting a lot of their buildings from China. A lot of the materials, because all of them say they want to wait 14 to 16 weeks. And I'm like, hey, that's funny. That's how long it takes us to get our product from Asia.
Right.
So, what are your thoughts on some of the dynamics of bootstrapping like that? If somebody's listening saying, look, you could do it this way, or if you are going to do it at DIY, this is what you want to be, watch out for these steps and these things.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the DIY is interesting. It really depends on the scale and the complexity of the build, right? I mean, a lot of times when you're bringing in a general contractor such as myself, there's always a cost to that, right? As opposed to DIY, because you're paying for professionals that are on site. These are people that take salary. Labor typically in any industry mechanics on a vehicle, construction, most of your cost is labor. Material can be expensive, but a lot of it's labor. So, that is a factor. But really it comes down to the technical side. If if it's something that you feel that you can manage, maybe there's 4 or 5 subcontractors and you're managing the process and it's not too technical, or maybe you have some really good trade partners that are really technical and can collaborate. That's probably something you can manage yourself. Where I relate it, where it's a little bit different than the example here, when I'm building, a $16 million custom home, I would tell a client, like, you're out of your mind if you want to do that by yourself. Like you have no idea the complexity and scheduling and who follows whom. And, when you're doing a commercial building, you can bootstrap it. You can, because, the reality is, and in that field, you could have a smaller TI builder, a smaller TI contractors, a small pickup guy. And so maybe your overhead's a little bit less. I mean, and so the reality is it really depends on scope. And so I'm glad you brought the civil engineering, because, for you being willing to look at that, the problem is nationally, civil engineering is probably one of the most sought after trade partners and engineers. Like, they're just limited all throughout the country. I look in Arizona, we're limited to just a few of them. And so they control the market, which means they control the pricing. And so as you can leverage that, it's supply demand. And so as you understand that, and, Michael, you've done your research, like you can probably have some savings and, bootstrap it and make it a little bit more cost effective for you.
So let's go to the flip side now. You got $16 million home. You got that. There's so much that can go wrong there.
Yeah.
And it's worth it to, so what are some things on these bigger projects, if something was going to go wrong, and you get even the greatest contract, because that's where you really want a good contract. You want somebody who knows the who, what, where, why, when, and how the situation. You want the regulations. You want somebody to look at the plans and read it like a book, to where you're like, oh, I could tell that's not right. Just by looking at it, that's going to save you time, money, and it's you can't screw around on like a out in the country kind of, project like I'm talking about. So that being said, what were some things that, like, when because I would consider you really accomplished, general contractor, when you're around the other guys, what can go wrong, and what do you guys usually have to watch out for and be cognitive of in that direction with the bigger projects?
Yeah. And this is where it gets really tricky, because low-hanging fruit, I'd say really inexpensive, very common. When you're building a custom home, typically you have custom cabinetry, your appliances are built in, which means, say like at an entry-level home or an apartment, the cabinetry's built, you go buy a refrigerator, you shove it into place, and there's a gap around the refrigerator and that refrigerator opening, right? On a custom home, you don't see any drywall. There's no gap. This cabinetry's built to perfection. That refrigerator slides on in there, but there's no reveal, there's no gap. The point being, if you have a really good understanding of mechanical and electrical and plumbing and cabinets and how to read that, when you push that in, there's a small area where that electrical has to be, where that plumbing has to be. It has to be dead on. And so at frame stage, you need to be able to take measurements before drywall's up and know exactly how cabinets lay out on the floor and get that laid in, so that you're not cutting drywall and making holes and moving electrical because it's in the wrong place, right? Because one thing I could tell you is your trade partners and subs, their job is just to get in and get out. Most of them are piece rate, that, they're not checking. They're going in. And so your job as a supervisor is to be there all the time and checking quality and install, laying out plumbing and cabinetry and all these things. That's the easy part. And it's still tricky, right? The really complicated part is right now, buildings are getting more and more complicated. And what I mean by that, from healthy living and how tight these homes are, and waterproofing and mechanical design. And so, ERV and all these different elements. And what happens is, on the exterior of the home, you may have 6 different finishes. You may have brick and stone and stucco and, siding and, concrete. I mean, all these different finishes. And so what ends up happening is waterproofing and making sure you don't have penetrations, making sure that window depths. And, is this window, you could have the same size window, but this one has brick returning to it, this one has stone, and this one has stucco. So that means your reveals are different the way you frame it. And so the point being is that even for my guys on some of these builds, and when you're building on a hillside on the side of a mountain, now you got to understand how to read civil drawings and drainage and make sure you have, French drains and piping in there so that you can control water, and, making sure that you waterproof your walls and footings right, so you don't have, calcium issues. And, anyway, so the point being is that there's a lot of technical stuff that I can assure you, the reason why you have a superintendent, and I do, is because the trades will miss this stuff. They'll miss these details. And a year from now, 2 years from now, what happens when that water is leaking into the home and you have mold and a water leak and you have to open the walls up? So that's the risk that comes later on some of these complicated builds for sure.
Wow. So now, because you have this skill set, again, do you have your own investments? Like, do you have multiple properties? Because it's such a nice skill set to have. I mean, you could save a lot of money by you and your partners to say, well, this project's for us. Then we're going to build a series of warehouses or build a series of like apartment buildings. And have you done that and lease them out yourself? And that's part of your portfolio?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've done that. Our office in particular, we've had a few homes that we've built and sold. That's what you call speculative, right? Investment properties. Primarily right now, because of I'd call it the luxury, the high-end projects that we're doing. Those are what's called build to suit, which means someone such as yourself would purchase the land, you hire us to build it. And, it really depends how risk averse you are, right? And so, I knew a lot of people in 2006, 7 that market's great. They're printing money essentially, right? So they're like, let's buy this deal and we'll roll it into this one, or roll it into this one. All of a sudden that meter runs dry and the bank comes collecting. And this company you built for 10, 20, 30 years, now you have all this debt. So yes, there's always room for investment. You're going to make more money that way. You can leverage that, but the reality is there's more risk. And so you have the opportunity to lose it all too. Right. So you just have to pick and choose those opportunities. And that's why we've blended a lot of commercial stuff in. And typically on the residential, I mean, I've been in business 12 years now, and we've only had 2 of our own specs that we've done. Most of it's been build to suit. And so my operation is more customer service driven because I have clients on every build. So I have to, appeal to them. I have to cater to them. But at the same time, there's no risk, when there's a build on the other side. So then you can try to figure out, okay, well, how do I leverage that to the earlier point I made about having brick and mortar and substance and land behind you?
I mean, you probably only know about, maybe more outside of Arizona, but what's the climate going to be in the next, 1 to 2, 3 years, you think, as far as like, is there a housing shortage? Are we going to build more? Are we going to build less? Is the price going to go up? Is it going to go down? I don't think you're Kreskin, but I'm just want to know, what are your thoughts on the matter if you had to, share those with us?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I attend a lot of like continuing education seminars with a lot of experts from all over the country that specialize in construction and housing. 100% we're short on housing nationally. We just are short. We're going to continue to be short for a long time. Part of that reason is a lot of, people have left the trades, so we don't have as much labor, and it continues to get smaller and smaller. I mean, a lot of our skilled trades, 50, 55, 60, they're leaving. There's not as many 20-year-olds coming in. You hear these statistics that it's 5 to 1, 7 to 1, so like every 5 people leaving, one's coming in. So it's just and what that means though, is that raises costs too, right? We've seen that, costs have been pretty high in construction. I don't see that coming down just based on inflation, based on limitations, supply and demand. The good subcontractors are booked for a long time out. And so there is a premium for that. So with that being said, we need more housing. It's harder to build housing because it's so expensive, and that entry barrier is pretty high. So it'll be interesting. I think the market will be pretty strong. You never know what interest rates will do, and turnover in election and other things always play a role. But in general, we're short on housing. It's very expensive to build, so it's kind of a weird bubble there.
What about commercial? What is there a shortage or a plethora of that at this point?
Yeah, for all of us, it's funny. There's some of these big commercial deals that have been put on hold because of financing. Because when you're doing an investment deal, 1 point in interest changes that deal entirely. And especially with the variable interest rate, it can really affect that. Because in commercial, you're not getting like a 30-year loan like you would on a house. You may get 5 or 7 years, and then you refinance. And so it's just something to look at. But with that being said, even with as many deals that have gone on hold, and you see people working from home since COVID and less office space, somehow, at least here, commercial is still hammering away. It hasn't slowed down. So there's still a lot of infrastructure. We're behind, nationally in infrastructure, and we're behind in, as there's been a lot of population growth in areas, you still have needs for industrial, commercial, retail, food, retail as far as shopping centers, maybe not as much because of Amazon and other things, but still where that's taken out, you still need Amazon centers, right? Like there's always opportunity demand for, as the world and industry changes.
long-term play for you? What's it look like 3 to 5, 10 down the line? What do you got planned for yourself?
That's a good question. So being the kind of basis of this conversation is I had mentioned that primarily we've been build a suit to this point. The plan in the next 5 years is to do a lot of development, and we're working on some opportunities right now because the reality is because of the social media platform and reputation we built, a lot of people reach out like, Brad, I want an AFT house. I don't want to wait 2 years to go through design and build. Like I want to move in next month. And so to have our product out there, that's like our product. And to your point, to have, some opportunity from development, like that's the goal for sure.
It sounds great. Really, it's nice. It's just, because I'm getting in, just dabbling with this, little project. I just think it's a great skill set to have, it's, look, I think it's great investment still, it's property. It's awesome. Tell everybody how they can find out more about you and what you do.
Yeah, thank you. So I have a podcast as well. It's the Brad Leavitt podcast. Pretty simple. You can search Brad Leavitt on any podcast platform. AFT Construction stands for A Finer Touch. So aftconstruction.com. If you go to any social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, AFT Construction, it'll pop up. You can search Brad Leavitt on Instagram or LinkedIn. That'll come up as well. So again, Brad Leavitt, AFT Construction. You can YouTube, you find us anywhere. So
isn't that amazing? You can just show your projects. People love to see, products, like when it's first starting out to when it comes to fruition. I mean, that gets eyeballs and also the retention on the video, the people stay to the end, to see what happens. I mean, it's great, and that's wonderful that, you would think this be mundane, 20 years ago, but you'd be surprised, like now you're not surprised, but like other people might be surprised. Now it's like, you could have a builder can be an influencer,
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I think it's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Gear up for your next adventure and head over to bolotour.com to check out the amazing Bolo Pack and their other innovative outdoor gear. Catch you next time.